Guess what? What?
It is I, Rubex!
Hello and welcome to my top 5 hardcore PvP MMOs of all time. Now before you shake your fist at me and scream blasphemy, just remember, we are all entitled to our opinions. And when making this list, I considered games that had the most brutal PvP rule sets. Now before we get to the list, close your eyes, take a deep breath, and let's remember the old days of PvP. Having stumbled my way into MMOs like Ultima Online and Asheron's Call Darktide at an early age, I got a good taste of the gritty player versus player combat that would later be called FFA PvP. At this time, the modem was how we connected to the internet. If you don't know what a modem is, visit a museum or Wikipedia. You lucky little shit. You'll never know the struggle. The concept of online games was pretty new at the time. To add to that, implementing specific variables like free-for-all player versus player combat with full loot and XP loss was virtually unheard of. It's kind of like a kid for the first time finding a Playboy underneath his brother's bed. The feeling of complete adrenaline kicks in. OMG, titties. Then more adrenaline kicks in, realizing your older brother could walk in any minute and PvP you in real life. Now the same sort of feeling of adrenaline also happens in games with high risk versus high rewards. If I die, I lose all my shit. And possibly the last 30 minutes of leveling experience, depending on the game. It's that first second when you run across another player in these types of games. Your heart rate increases, your hands start to mildly shake. This is how games should be played, in my opinion. Anyways, let's get to the list. Number 5, Bane. Bane was the first all-encompassing FFA PvP MMO. Sadly, it was let down by launch bugginess, but it really brought it all together. Loot, FFA PvP, stealing, empire building. Bane was notable for emphasizing player versus player combat, implementing non-conventional races, and specializing in siege warfare. The game also featured a seamless world map and made no use of instancing. Players were also allowed to own cities and capitals, and most of the property and cities in Bane were player-made. Number 4, EVE Online. EVE Online was the most hardcore and most commercially successful MMO, but least enjoyable PvP gameplay from a skill perspective. That said, it was still a most memorable gaming experience, and in many people's eyes, one of the best games ever made. Players of EVE Online can participate in a number of in-game professions and activities, including mining, piracy, manufacturing, trading, exploration, and combat. At the end of the day, EVE Online's universe, currency system, and overall gameplay experience is still in a league of its own. Number 3, Asheron's Call Darktide. Asheron's Call is one of the few games at the time to include projectile-based combat. A skilled player could dodge out of the way of an incoming projectile. A lower-level player could beat a higher-level player based on the way they played. Add to that, free-for-all, full loot, player versus player combat. Upon death, you lose a portion of your experience and items, so the risks were incredibly high, but the rewards were incredibly high as well. At the end of the day, Asheron's Call Darktide featured ruthless, fast-paced PvP combat in an open world, and for myself and many others, it is really one of the most amazing gaming experiences I've ever personally had. Number 2, Ultima Online. Now, Ultima Online was lower on the skill respect, but it really was the first, and it holds a special place for most people going back. Modems, griefing, and of course, the legendary Lord British. Ultima Online was released on September 24th, 1997. It was the first game of the genre to reach widespread popularity and really had immense influence on all later games of this type. And number 1 on the list, Darkfall Online. Darkfall was a spiritual success to Bane. It had higher skill PvP and full loot in an open world. Besides land combat and battles, there's also sea combat, which really added another dimension to the game. Darkfall, when it was working properly, nothing else could really touch it in terms of skill. Darkfall, hands down, had some of the most exciting large group PvP combat in any game. This was of course during its peak, with the player population high enough for massive battles. When these massive battles took place, there really was nothing like it. This was really the first time that 500, 600, 700 people were on the same screen fighting each other, taking over cities, guild versus guild politics, guilds hating each other. Other guilds would band together, small guilds, big guilds, alliances were formed. The guild politics and the territorial control in Darkfall was hands down some of the best I've ever seen. It was an absolute crazy, amazing time. The ship combat, the sea combat, being a pirate on a ship, it was just a whole nother level to the game. Darkfall was absolutely an amazing experience for those who were able to play it during its peak, during its prime. These are the top 5 most hardcore PvP MMOs of all time, in my opinion, from what I've played since 1997. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Highly appreciate your time. My name is RipperX. As always, see you on the flip side.